Welcome to the third video in a series entitled Mystery of the Chateau, where I'm discussing or giving my commentary on a mystery or a treasure hunt located at Rennes-le-Chateau, a hamlet in southern France. In this video, I'm going to be going over the second parchment from which Saunière, the priest, found. Henry Lincoln says that he found 4 parchments. I already discussed the first one in the second video. In this video, we're going to be going over the second parchment. And when discussing the second parchment, what I believe is this is Henry Lincoln's creation. This is his Frankenstein. This is when he took a dead treasure hunting story, resurrected it, and crafted it into this massive conspiracy theory that is still going on today. And before I start, let me give you a general sense or an idea of the type of person or character that we're dealing with in Henry Lincoln. So Henry Lincoln made some YouTube videos. I don't think he's alive anymore, but he added to his conspiracy theory with a bunch of videos. And in one video, he discusses this code that I'm going to talk about from the gravestones. And it sounds as though that he's getting a lot of feedback or flack from people saying this whole thing is garbage or BS. And he wants to come back with this code and how important it is. So he says in this video, it's an 8-minute video, and he says, so I took it to the French Defense Ministry to see if they could crack this code. And what you find out is that he gives the implication that the French didn't want to crack this code, and they didn't want him snooping around. So he has to go to the British intelligence agency, which he says he went to, and the British intelligence agency told him, this is the most complex code we've ever seen. So let that sink in a little bit. This is the guy you're dealing with. It even later on in his life, he's still wants you to think that this stupid little story or code has worldly implications and espionage, and James Bond has got to go down there to see this castle and crack the code. He thinks you will believe him. And a lot of people do, but this is the kind of guy we're dealing with. I mean, imagine if I told you I got this email or I got this letter in the mail and it looked like there was a code inside it. So I took it to the Pentagon and the Pentagon told me, oh, we can't crack this thing. Or I took it to the CIA. I took it to spies, and the spies told us, oh my God, if that thing gets out, all hell is going to break loose. So let's start by just setting the stage with what kind of person Henry Lincoln is. And the first question we have to ask is, did the second parchment actually exist? Or was it a product of Henry's imagination? It doesn't really matter because the code he gets from it is all his workings. But was there an actual parchment, like a stone slab, like the very first one out in front of the church? I don't know. But again, it doesn't matter. What's important is the code that is taken from the second parchment is how Henry puts the story in his hands and gets control of the story, how he's going to spin it in his direction and take it wherever he wants to go. Regardless of what Saunière wanted, it's now Henry's. And Henry starts his story off in the graveyard that's next to the church, where he claims that Saunière went to great lengths to hide, deface, vandalize certain gravestones that were pertaining to this secret or this treasure. And the question becomes, if he vandalized or defaced these gravestones, how do we know who's even in there? If he went to great lengths to get rid of any of the evidence pertaining to this treasure hunt, did he not get rid of the records? According to Henry Lincoln, Saunière's plan was foiled by some other book publisher who published recordings of the gravestone and who is buried in this tiny little graveyard. Now, that part to me sounds really suspect. That could be true, but it sounds very suspect that somebody was hired to go through this tiny little village and record gravestones in order to sell this book to someone else who would say, gosh, I want to look at graves that are in Rennes-le-Chateau and who is buried there. And add this to the fact that it was actually Saunière who made this large slab of these parchments that were pretty obvious messages that there's a treasure somewhere. So his behavior seems contradictory. He wants to tell you there's a treasure, but yet he wants to go through and erase all the evidence. It just seems a little odd. In any event, now we have to trust this little book. As we go further, we're trusting Henry's little book of graves to where the story's going to go next. See, this is how he got control. Because all of a sudden now, we have no idea who's buried in this graveyard because Saunière got rid of all the evidence, apparently. So Henry can give us any name he wants, and we have to use him as our resource as we're doing this treasure hunt. So he can tell us a relative of Louis XIV is buried there, or he could tell us, oh, there was this Templar knight that was buried there, and I know now because I have this book. And that's why I say I question the validity or the truthfulness of this book, because now if you went to Henry, my guesses would be like, yeah, I have the book, but you can't have it, because I think the whole thing is BS. But it's how he gained control. Now he's got the graveyard, and he can tell you who's in there, and no one else will know. In addition to that, he can tell you what's written on the graves, which is very pivotal to the code breaking, apparently. You need to know what was written on the graves. And he's got the source for leading you on this treasure hunt because he's got the little book. And again, maybe the book is real, maybe it's not. I think it's BS, but it's how he gained control. And then, so notice this is where he says the key to the second parchment is located on the gravestones. So Henry's got the key. And if you are not in possession of this book, you again have to rely on Henry. So ultimately he says that the second parchment has all these letters, 140 letters. Actually, they throw out 12 of them for some unknown reason, and they get 128, and he goes through this long ordeal of how he decoded the message from the second parchment using the non-existent gravestones or using the book that's in his possession. And he goes through this long ordeal of how he deciphered this code using the gravestones, and goes back and forth and using a chessboard, and it's all this crazy stuff. But here's the code that he gets. Shepherdess, no temptation, to which puissant Tenière hold the key. Peace 681. By this cross and horse of God, I complete or destroy this demi-guardian at midday, blue apples. And he claims in his documentary that this code is a perfect anagram of the headstone, which is missing. And the funny part about that is, in one of his videos that I showed, or that I talked about earlier, he shows the headstone. And you can see all the letters. Again, you don't know if it's real or not, but you can see all the letters that he claims were on this headstone. And what you find out is this coded message is not a perfect anagram to the headstone. Whether he meant to show this headstone earlier or later, but you can see that it is not a perfect anagram. There's a Q in the headstone. There's no Q's in this message. There's it's like 6 T's on the grave, and I think he's got 11 or 12 in this message. He's got a K in there for the key, the word key, and there's no K in the headstone. But all he has to do to refute that is by saying, well, that's what the stone carver wanted to say, or he can manipulate the language, which he likes to do. He can say, well, no, this word is in Latin, well, that one's in Greek, that one's in French. So what you get is Henry Lincoln's own language. It's not a perfect anagram. It's Henry Lincoln's own made-up language. He wants it to say shepherdess, no temptation, to which puissant Tenière hold the key. It's not an anagram, and you have no idea how he came up with this. But what you do know is he came up with this. Now we're talking about 2 painters, Poussin and Tenière, although you're not sure which Tenière it is because there was 2 of them, the elder and the younger. And this is where he throws it into the paintings. You got to start looking at the paintings to get the key. That's really pivotal that he says Poussin, Tenière hold the key. And again, there's no K, but they got the key to this treasure. So now you got to start looking at paintings, and he's going to throw in some paintings because this is the direction he wants to go. And as I said, I don't think Saunière had any idea about paintings or anything like that. He claims that Saunière went to Paris and picked up these, but I think everybody's refuted that, and that's all false. Now we're going into paintings to figure out, where do we find the key to this treasure? Please tell us, Henry, because you're our only resource. That brings us to this painting by Nicolas Poussin in 1653. So now the painter in 1653 holds the key to this treasure. He knew where it was, apparently, and he's got the key, and the key is somewhere in this painting. Now, the painting has a resemblance to the area around the village. However, I'm not going to go as far as to say that a grave underneath a tree is exclusive to Poussin or any painting for that matter, and that the hills in the background don't look like Greece or France. I don't know. I haven't been to either. But Henry claims this is an exact image of the area. I'll give him this, though. The size of the grave and the shape of the grave, a large blocky rectangle, those two seem to be pretty similar in size. So he's got that. But in any event, so we've got this painting, and supposedly this painting is going to give us the key. But the odd part is here, Henry doesn't say who's buried there, when they were buried, who buried them, or anything along those lines. He actually changes course and goes into the painting and the geometry of the painting almost purposely, because of the fact that he knows he's doing a hoax. He doesn't want people going through the hills of southern France digging up all these areas, nor does he want them treasure hunters going into this property and just digging massive holes. Although that would be the next logical step in a treasure hunting, journey. Who's buried there? Let's dig them up. Let's get a team of archaeologists. There's apparently a massive treasure there. But no, he sidetracks and goes into, well, look at the geometry of this painting. Even in the other graveyard with the 2 headstones that he needed to decode the message, he purposely says that the body that's buried there has been moved. But he doesn't go into, and this is on purpose, he doesn't go into when they were moved, where they were moved, why they were moved, and who moved them. Because he wants to keep it fluffy. He doesn't want people going in there destroying the cemetery, trying to figure out where the key is. But that's the elephant in the room. That's, if there's a treasure and there's 2 pieces of evidence that are gravestones, I mean, come on. What are we doing here? And let me go back to the headstone that was defaced, or the missing headstone and the stone that was defaced. Remember that P-S that was found on the original, there was first parchment? That P-S, according to the little book, or according to Henry and his language, that's actually at the very top of the grave. Now, that's when you know this whole thing is a big hoax. Because if this Marie Blanchefort, who was buried in 1791, asked for her secret code or secret society to be advertised on her grave, that just sounds like the stupidest thing anyone would do. Isn't the stone carver saying, what the heck is this P-S? And what did she do? Did she write it out and say, I want my secret code? And does everyone else in the secret society have that, just to let them know that they are in this secret society? Does Sir Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci and Louis the 14th, do they all have this P-S on their gravestone? Because if they do, it seems odd to me that Henry didn't know this right off the bat, because if everyone in the society has this all over your graves, it's really not a secret society anymore. It should be pretty much common knowledge of who's in the club and who's not. But no, that's not the case. This is the single person who has the secret society's code left on their grave, apparently by the former curator or priest and stone carver, who said, you know what, we should probably put her secret society on there too. I think she would like that when she's dead. Yeah, let's do that. But we're going to be she's going to be the only person that has this on it. That's how you know this whole thing is just a facade to sell books. And ultimately, with these three pieces of evidence, I'm talking about the first parchment, the second parchment, and then this painting, Henry gets the idea, just from those pieces of evidence, that the treasure is a secret held by the Catholic Church, that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were still alive after their death. They moved to France, went into the suburban areas, had some kids, and no one figured it out except for all these people that are listed in Henry's book, that includes popes, bishops, Templar knights, and all the most famous people in history that you can imagine. So that's how he came to his conclusion of this secret society and all these people, and that the treasure is not physical, it's a secret in southern France. And by the way, this priest, Saunier, stumbled upon it and bribed the Catholic Church for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he was fine, and nobody else figured out the secret, and it was buried until Henry Lincoln got it in 1970 and cracked the code. So that's how he got his book, from those three pieces of evidence. I think it's kind of funny, but I think that's all I have on this. I hope you enjoyed this.